Hi there Waltineers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and today we've got to talk about Villains Land again. And the reason why I'm saying again here is because if you remember, it was last month in my previous video, but I did a deep dive into Villains Land and discussed the layout that had been revealed for Villains Land from the Magic Kingdom expansion permits that had been filed for the area. But now, 1 month on, we've actually got new updated permit plans for Villains Land and the whole expansion area that show differences in terms of the shape and size of the building. So I want to circle back to that and discuss this in greater depth. And then also, there's been a lot of chatter online recently regarding some rumours and speculation for what could be within Villains Land. But I think where we need to begin are the facts of the situation. All we've got to go off so far are these permits. January 16th, there was a wastewater document that was filed with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that showed the outlines of the expansion at Magic Kingdom. But then, on February 20th, a new updated version of this document with the permit plans was filed with the FDEP again, and it shows some changes in terms of more defined outlines for the buildings that are now all listed as facilities, and most importantly, shapes and sizes of the buildings have changed as well. So, much like I did last time, I want to layer this on top of Google Earth and give a rough approximation over the size of these buildings so we know where we stand. And so, this is the previous permit that we saw from January 16th, and now this is the new updated permit from February 20th that show the new approximate sizes of the buildings within the expansion area. And a couple of things do stand out straight away. So I want to talk about Building 1, which is the largest building, and this has gone from 83,000 square feet approximately to 99,000 square feet approximately. But also importantly, it's changed its positioning as well. It's actually moved further back into that top right hand corner behind the back of the Haunted Mansion show building. So it's gone further into that top right corner, and I want to make a point of this because last October I did a video based upon the drainage permits for the expansion, and I said that top right hand corner would make a lot of sense to put a massive show building for e-ticket dark ride in that corner, because then it could share the existing backstage infrastructure and backstage access roads at the Magic Kingdom. And lo and behold, now in these new permits we can see it's moving further into that top right hand corner. And to give you a bit of context in terms of the size here, Rise of Resistance over at Hollywood Studios is just shy of around 100,000 square feet. So this building within Villains Land, if it does end up being this size based on the permits, it will be the largest show building at Magic Kingdom. So it's a substantial size of attraction there. Then building number 2, which is most likely going to be another major attraction building based upon its size, has gone from 55,000 square feet to approximately around 69,000 square feet. Now, to give context here, Rock and Roller Coaster over at Hollywood Studios, that's approximately around 70,000 square feet. Then building 3 has actually decreased in size down to 12,800 square feet. So it's a very small change in terms of the size here, but what I want to note is that the shape of the buildings become more defined. Now, personally, in terms of my speculation, I'm still leaning towards this building being a part of a major outdoor roller coaster. We've seen in the Blue Sky artwork there were a couple of roller coaster tracks within the Blue Sky artwork that was released at D23 in 2024, and if they do go that direction with having an outdoor roller coaster, then this could be maybe a big elaborate show scene inside of a building, a bit like Hagrid's over at Universal, and it's become a more defined shape. Personally, I don't think it's large enough to be a quick service or a table service restaurant, because a table service restaurant the size of Be Our Guest is roughly around 25,000 square feet. So I think it's too small to be that, and so I'm leaning more towards this being part of some sort of attraction within Villains Land. Now, there's 2 other buildings within the Villains Land area. You've got Building 4 and Building 5. Building 4, there's been a small increase in terms of the size of the building there, but I still think this makes the most sense for this to be a train station within Villains Land, as it's placed there right on the railroad train tracks around Magic Kingdom. And also, as you can see in Building 2, that's right there on top of the train track. So potentially we might be seeing the railroad get a new track around the back of Building 2, or potentially it might go through Building 2, a bit like Tiana's Bayou Adventure or the former Splash Mountain with an interior show scene for the railroad there. But then in terms of Building 5, the categorization of this building on the permit has changed. From in Permit 1, it was listed as a building, and now it's been listed as a facility instead. And the rest of all the buildings within this permit are all listed as facilities. And so potentially the change in the classification there might indicate that this might be a guest-focused building. And if it is a guest-focused building, you know, somewhere where the guests can walk to, then to include that Building 5, which is so far out away from the rest of the buildings of Villains Land, it would increase the overall size of Villains Land up to around 16 acres. So we don't know what Building 5 is going to be used for yet, but it could easily be backstage infrastructure stuff as well. And the main body of Villains Land is going to be Building 1, 2, 3, and 4 within the area there. And then next up, we have the building to the side of the Haunted Mansion, and this building has decreased in size from 5,700 square feet to 4,000 square feet approximately. And in my previous video, I had said that this is either going to be an extended queue for the Haunted Mansion, it could be restrooms for Villains Land of the whole area there, or potentially a Haunted Mansion parlour. Now, I think given that we're now seeing it decrease in size, it's a lot less likely that this is going to be the Haunted Mansion parlour. But I do think it could be a new extended queue related to the Haunted Mansion. And the reason for that is because, as you can see with Building 2, which is outlined in orange there as part of Piston Peak, it's much closer to the existing Haunted Mansion exterior queue for the attraction. And if they're going to have a major walkway going into not only Piston Peak but feeding back towards Villains Land, I think that they might need to make a new queue area for the Haunted Mansion and really open up the guest flow for this new expansion there from Liberty Square. So it could be that it's a new extended queue, and considering the unusual shape of the building to the side of a Haunted Mansion, I think it leans more towards it being that. And I've said previously that speculatively, I would like it to be themed to maybe a mausoleum to kind of extend that Haunted Mansion storytelling out into the queue area there, and it'd be a good way of building the storytelling of the Haunted Mansion before you even get on the actual attraction itself. Then we've got Building 1 and Building 2 within Piston Peak National Park. Now, Building 1, there's a negligible change there. It's now approximately around 45,000 square feet. And then you've got Building 2, which has seen a pretty large reduction. It's been reduced by over half, down to 9,100 square feet. Now, given that we've got the artwork for the area, this is most likely going to be the flat ride within Piston Peak National Park, and I think this is going to be an outdoor flat ride. And what we're seeing in terms of the building here could be for the queue and the loading for a flat ride for the cars area there. And something I want to make a note of here is when you look at Villains Land, it looks pretty sparse in the middle. You know, it could be that there's a large water feature or something like that in there that we can't see. But I personally think that we're not seeing every building listed within the Villains Land area within this permit. I think the buildings that we're seeing here within this permit are specifically attraction-related buildings. My reason for that is because we know that Building 1 within the Piston Peak area is going to be for the indoor segment of the rally race attraction for cars. And we know that Building 2 is also going to be attraction-related. So given that fact, it could be that everything else we're looking at here is attraction-related, which if the building to the side of Haunted Mansion is an extended queue, then that would mean that that's attraction related. And then Building 4 up at the top, which if it's a new train station, then the Walt Disney World Railroad, that is an attraction. So it would be attraction related as well, which means that there could be other buildings yet to populate the area within Villains Land, and we might be seeing more come to the area like to the side of Building 1 to kind of block more of a view of Haunted Mansion there. They could potentially put some sort of a large table service restaurant into that area, or maybe it's to the side of Building 2. But I don't think we're seeing everything within Villains Land here. As we all know, within any Disney theme park land, there's shops and storefronts and quick service restaurants and table service restaurants and that kind of stuff that really populate the area of the land, a little bit like Galaxy's Edge. It is possible that the quick service and the table service restaurant could be built within Building 1 and Building 2 and kind of layered into those buildings because they are so large. But typically Disney do like to spread things further out, and I think that they would want that kind of wow moment or the discoverability factor like you have with Galaxy's Edge, where you turn the corner and it kind of opens up a new cinematic landscape there and tells a whole new story within the land. Now, at this point in the video, that's everything that we can kind of analyze in terms of the permit plans, but now I want to move on into the rumours and speculation portion of the video, and where I want to begin is February 14th, as Len Tester of touringplans.com and the Disney Dish podcast posted on the WDW Magic forums that he'd heard that the initial plans for Villains Land had been scrapped, and that Imagineers had been told to think of bigger, bolder ideas, and that the budget was secondary. Now, once this was posted, it kind of caught like wildfire online in terms of the speculation over what this could mean. And where I stand on this is the time frame is very important here. Supposedly, it seems like it was said recently, but this could be something that happened a while ago, maybe just after D23 in 2024, that we're being told to think of bigger, bolder ideas doesn't necessarily mean that the actual plans themselves were scrapped for the attractions, just it could be that they need to plus the attractions and basically throw everything they've got at these attractions, and that's what the edict might be here. In terms of bigger, bolder animatronic technology, the ride systems, the effects, the illusions, just basically throw everything at these attractions to make them the most wow moment attractions that they could possibly make. From the budget is secondary in terms of this. So I would love to know what the time frame of when this was said, because just looking at the permits, the difference in the building's position and the shapes and sizes isn't enough to say the plans are scrapped. They are very much still the same plans that were filed with the FDEP back in January, and the fact that they've even got to the stage of filing these permits, it's an expensive process to file permits, and I don't think Disney will be filing these permits and then scrapping the plans and refiling them all over again. And so that's the reason why I'm leaning more towards this being to do with plussing the attractions and making them the most wow moment attractions that they possibly could, in the budget secondary in terms of that. And then on February 26th, a new article that was posted on The Wrap by Drew Taylor was titled "How Disney's Villains Land is Getting Reimagined Under Josh D'Amaro." And this also caught a lot of speculation online in terms of what was said in the article. Now, the article states that Disney is supposedly moving in a more family-friendly direction with Villains Land. And the way that I'm choosing to interpret this statement, it means that Villains Land is going to be more accessible to the whole family, with more family-friendly attractions. Not that they're taking the initial concept of Villains Land and trying to sand down the sharper edges of Villains Land and making it less villainous, for lack of a better word, but instead trying to make the attractions more family focused, a bit more like the rest of the Magic Kingdom's attractions here, so the whole family can ride these attractions together. Unlike something like Tron Light Cycle Run that has a very high height requirement, that means that not all the family can ride the attraction together. So that's where I'm interpreting that statement itself. Now, later on in the article, some rumoured details for what Villains Land will entail were also listed, and where I stand on this is basically I'm a little bit sceptical. Some of it makes sense and some of it just doesn't, in my opinion, and I want to go through it and just give my own 2 cents and my reasoning for it. Now, the first rumoured detail is that Maleficent is supposedly moving from the Maleficent Dragon roller coaster that we saw within the Blue Sky artwork, and is now going to be the main IP anchoring the major dark ride attraction within Villains Land, which is supposedly going to be a e-ticket boat ride using the same ride technology from the Shanghai Disneyland Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. And if that's true, then that's something that I've been wanting to see at Walt Disney World for a long time, that Shanghai Pirates boat ride tech at Walt Disney World. And it makes a lot of sense to have Maleficent be the main IP here, because Maleficent in many ways is the main villain of all the villains. Maleficent's the main villain in Fantasmic right at the end. Maleficent's used prominently within Festival of Fantasy with the dragon sequence obviously in that parade, and also gets prime placement in many of the villains floats within the Halloween parades around the world as well. And so to use Maleficent as the main draw factor for a massive e-ticket dark ride makes a lot of sense. Maleficent's extremely popular as a character amongst the villains, so that makes sense. And then the second rumour here is what I'm most sceptical of, And I'll explain my reasoning for it. But basically, the rumour states that because Maleficent's going to be the boat ride for Villains Land, the Maleficent coaster is going to change to the Emperor's New Groove instead. And that roller coaster sequence with the pull the lever moment in the movie. Now, personally, I'm skeptical of this, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And the reason for it is because when it comes to The Emperor's New Groove, it was a movie that didn't do very well at the box office at the time when it was released in 2000. But over time, it's gone on to gain a cult following within the Disney community online. But if you look at the wider average Disney guest who is going to be coming to Villains Land, using one of your two major attractions within the land and theming it to something which has a cult fan following and not a wider appeal, I think Disney wouldn't go in that direction, personally, just based on a marketing standpoint. And so that's the reason why I'm skeptical of this second rumour, and also basing a whole major theme park attraction on what amounts to basically a 30-second gag from The Emperor's New Groove. I just don't feel like it makes a lot of sense. And then the third part of this whole rumour is that there's supposedly a dinner show that will be hosted by Hades, and it will have Pain and Panic also on stage, hosting and showcasing villains on stage as sort of a comedy act, with prefix dining as part of this table service restaurant dinner show. Now, where I stand on this is I'm 50-50, because the concept itself I think could quite easily work, and it's a fantastic idea. I think people would love to go to that kind of dinner show with Hades as the host and see all the different villains, and it would be very, very popular. But the other side of this whole thing is that operationally, I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense, because with a dinner show, even if it is prefix, people are going to want to linger in that restaurant environment to try and see as much of the dinner show as possible and see as many of the villains as possible and see as much of the show as possible. And so operationally, you're turning over less tables and it's not going to be as higher profitability via square foot of that restaurant. And even if it is a very large restaurant, I still think people are going to linger and want to see more of the show. So that's one thing I've got to mention there. And the second part is that if this is going to be using actors on stage performing as villains, a bit like Villains and Fairly Ever After, but as a dinner show, then they're going to need to be paid as equity actors. And they're not going to be, paid the same rate as normal characters within the parks. So if they were to go in that direction, it would make it a more costly endeavour in terms of a restaurant. Whereas if they did just traditional Disney villains character dining, it would be less expensive to operate that. So just those two things, but I'm 50-50 on this one in terms of it working. I think it would be a fantastic idea if they did go in this direction. Hades is a very popular villain, and I think it would be a great host to that kind of dinner show environment. And then it was also mentioned that apparently one of the previous plans for a restaurant within Villains Land was to theme it to Madame Medusa from The Rescuers. Now, Madame Medusa isn't one of the most easily recognisable villains, nowhere near the top of that list. So personally, I think when it comes to this information, could it be a case that this information is being put out there to try and knock us off the scent of the direction of where they want to go in with Villains Land, and then have a bigger wow moment when it's all revealed at D23, hopefully this August? We'll find out, time will tell, and we'll get the information in terms of what Villains Land will entail. But in terms of my own opinion on what I would like to see within Villains Land, I still would love to see a Maleficent dragon roller coaster like we saw within the original Blue Sky artwork for the land. And that's not to say that this has to be a thrill level like Tron. It could be something more similar to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train or Slinky Dog, but the theming itself could really sell this attraction and have us go through the hedge of thorns from Sleeping Beauty and have that be the e-ticket roller coaster within the land. I think it lends itself better to a roller coaster than a boat ride, Maleficent and the dragon premise there for the attraction. And they could maybe even put a more family-friendly kiddie version of the coaster like Barnstormer in amongst the theming of the Hedge of Thorns, so you've got something for younger guests who can't ride the attraction that's similar to Slinky Dog or Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, but then you've got something for them as well, and you've got like a third attraction whilst using the same theming. That's what I would love to see. And then in terms of the major e-ticket boat ride, I think boat ride makes the most sense within Villains Land because it's high capacity and you're going to want something that can really push through the guest throughput and the capacity, a bit like Pirates of the Caribbean, and that the whole family can ride together and they can monetize it in terms of individual lightning lanes for this attraction. And so what I would do is I would create an attraction like a Voyage of the Villains and have it be all of the most villainous moments of the villains within one attraction, and have it be the greatest hits in many ways. And use animatronic technology mixed with maybe the Project EXO developments there with a larger-than-life puppetry, and create characters on a scale that we've never seen in terms of animatronics before. I'm talking Jafar in snake form, obviously Maleficent in dragon form, and also Chernabog as the main finale for the attraction. And they could even theme it to maybe Hades and the River Styx to try and have that be the ride narrative for the reason why we're in the boat. As after all, the underworld, most of these villains meet their demise within the films, and so if they're meeting their demise, where they're going to end up in the underworld with Hades, and so that could be the premise for the attraction and bringing all the villains together within one attraction. I think if you want the widest appeal possible, guaranteeing that everybody can see all of the villains in one attraction, I think would be the way to go. Then other things I would love to see within Villains Land, this is just my own armchair imagineering here obviously. The Evil Queen's Lair from Snow White, I think that'd be a great concept for a quick service restaurant or bar, where you could have the Evil Queen's cauldron right in the centre of this dining or bar area. And Imagineering could even like have dry ice coming out of it continuously that have the taps on the inside of the cauldron, and then to have your drink served, you could put the glass inside the cauldron, pour the drink from the tap hidden from guest view, and deliver potions to the guests. I think that'd be great. Or even serve up some poisoned apples and things like that as a candy confectionery kind of thing. And then in terms of the table service restaurant, what I would think would work best is to try and do the inverse of Cinderella's Royal Table. We know that that is prime real estate in terms of character dining opportunity at the Magic Kingdom. And if you do an inverse of that, it's an easier concept for people to understand that you've got Cinderella's Royal Table where you can meet all the princesses, and if you've got the inverse of that, you could have Lady Tremaine's Wicked Banquet or something like that, where the wicked stepmother's been banished from the kingdom with the wicked stepsisters, and they are now hosting their own banquet with all of the most villainous characters who are now outside of the kingdom's gates. And that would be a great way to try and do villains character dining, and I think people would love that as well. So that's what I would do with Villains Land. They're just some of my ideas there of what I would like to see with Villains Land. But now it's over to you, the Waltineers, as I would like to know what are your thoughts and opinions on Villains Land and everything that we're hearing so far, seeing the permit plans, and what you would like to see within Villains Land. Leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear all your suggestions in terms of the attractions and also the quick service and the table service dining. What would you like to see within Villains Land? And of course, be sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell, and check out the rest of the videos on this channel if you haven't already. And also a massive thank you to the official Waltineer Club over on Patreon for always supporting this channel. It's greatly appreciated. And I also want to give a shout out to the official Waltineer Gold members that you can see here on the screen right now, alongside Waltineer Diamond members JC Russell, Justin Tupper, and Tim Parsons. And with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.